and sort of juggle things a little bit more. That's the trick that everybody runs into. And even New York artists, once you become successful enough, you do like Jackson Pollock and you get out onto Long Island because you want to not be in it all the time. You don't want to be taken for granted. And what I thought was interesting about Houston in particular is it's not the center of the universe. Yeah, there's a lot of money there, and people always point that out. But what's interesting about them is that they have this overall strategy of we're an arts hub. They don't say we're the center of the art world. LA and London and New York sort of go back and forth with, trying to be the center. But what Houston tries to do is just be relevant all the time. You don't need to be the capital of anything. What you want to be is just good, and you want to make a point of being good. And when you're good, you want everybody else in the city to know about it too. So everybody's on the right page, because frankly, not everybody's, we're talking about the arts and culture, and not everybody is as good as everybody else, That's a utopian idea. I think we're not talking about a utopia. I think what we're talking about is forwarding talent. And when you come to a gallery and you see something that's unfamiliar with you should simply be curious. And I think there's this sort of worldly curiosity that every place needs to be better at. But a place like Berlin, which is kind of a world city already, is inherently curious about new things because it's this mutt of people who, basically Berlin was a crazy city that the Kaiser said, oh, I want to put my capital city here, and he invited the craziest people he could find to all live in his city. And it made it a very interesting place. And Portland's got a little bit of that going on, except people have just sort of picked it by itself. And we just simply need to take talent seriously.
I have a question about success. We're talking about finances, we're talking about relevancy, press, being good, as you just spoke about it. As a gallerist, I'm constantly redefining my definition of what success is. And so we keep talking about this like crescendo of are we ever going to arrive, or we were going to get to that climaxing. I was hoping you guys could speak about what your definition of success would be for Portland as an art scene.
My definition of success is like if we can bring 3,000 people every 2 years in Portland to see art, it's a success.
My definition of success is one great artist who kicks so much ass that the collateral cultural damage that is created by it changes the way a city thinks about itself and how little kids, when they're growing up, think, hey, other things are possible. That this artist makes people look at the world in a different way. That's success. That's all I care about. And maybe it's a slightly, fascist sort of way of looking at things. But excellence is tricky. And if you want to be good, you kind of got to be willing to stand out. And if a city's going to be good, you got to be willing to give a little bit of support to the people who are standing out. And you have to have all the mechanisms and organs to make. So if you see something that you wish was happening, find some other people or other resources, or make it happen yourself and simply make it happen. I think that's Portland's strength, is that we are, I don't see one solution. I don't see, a festival would be great. That's one solution. But I'd like to see more patrons who are serious. I'd like to see just an overall level of curiosity a little better. I'd like to see people who are willing to say that, Lucinda Parker is extremely overrated.
I guess I can only have my definition of success tempered by the previous two, and that I would like to see that my definition of success is us realizing that it's not one individual, one art star is going to come out of Portland that's going to be successful, like that actually any artist who's ever made a name in any city stood on the shoulders of giants within their own time even, that you don't achieve success through an individual experience or an individual act, that we all need each other to achieve success, and that the idea that we could have a giant international biennial would only actually occur if we all got our shit together, if we all sort of came around some sense of, well, that may be your idea of the greatest thing ever, but I don't actually agree with that, and being able to be okay with that, and not shutting each other down when there is disagreement in that. And so the idea of what is a success in the art world in Portland would be all of us, and this sounds so bloody hokey, coming together and really building the vision in which we actually probably all have.
It's probably already happened.
I absolutely agree. I hope I can step in. This is Gage from Resource.
Thank you.
She's an excellent gallerist, and I'm so excited to be in her company. I agree. I think context is so important to that. I agree with your international concept and biennial. I love that. I also equally love having that amazing artist that rocks the world and comes from here. But I think having a broader context in Portland that includes international artists is crucial to that artist, that one person breaking through.
Right, and really when I say just one artist, it's a way to provoke people. I don't know if people know I'm slightly sarcastic when I make these statements. I am slightly ironic, but there is something about like one person will often break the ice.
Yes.
And that's really what I'm talking about. And breaking the ice means developing a culture of respect.
Absolutely.
And it's a culture of respect that's broad forming. And yes, it's true. There's no just one person who does things. But at the same time, you can't fear the individual either. You have to, that's a form of respect.
Man, we're gonna start talking about Ayn Rand in here. I feel it. Come on, bring it.
And I hate it.
I agree. I'm just hoping that the embracing of more international art and more forward thinking and more expansion here will make those breakout artists more valuable and more, viable.
I think just changing the expectation that every time you walk out on the streets in Portland, that culturally you're going to find something that is interesting or makes you see the world differently is probably the best way. I mean, that's really the way an art scene or any cultural scene or even a city happens. You just put one foot in front of the other and you're always sort of looking for the surprises that are thrown at you existentially.
Yes. Thank you.
Can we, Patrick, do you want to say something? Okay.
There was one other person?
Yes?
Okay.
Just a couple of random comments having to do with this. The words New York and Los Angeles have come up over and over and over again in this conversation. And if we're talking about an issue of self-esteem, I think we've got to stop comparing ourselves to New York and Los Angeles. I think that it's perfectly fine to have a small town as long as it's not insular. And I do think that that's part of the Portland problem. And I think this is a wonderful step to have a gallery that's focused on something international here and something that gets outside 24 galleries, something that gets outside of 1, 2, 3, or 4 schools, and bring what is here to a focus and not scatter it, because a culture is not a succession of trends.
Right.
And I think if you can bring that all together, and I'm not part of the academia here, so I don't know if there's this competitive edge of people making one another wrong, but it certainly isn't going to help the issue of depth here.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
I want to give you a hug.
I want to give you a job writing somewhere.
Yeah, and I think the reason, just to also backfire what you were talking about, bringing up New York and Los Angeles, is I think we realize we're not them. That I think we have our own place. I've often described Portland as kind of a Switzerland. and without the banks that don't ask questions where the money came from. Actually, Peter Sheldon called it that, Switzerland with SUVs.
But it's good also to take a look at what's happening somewhere else. Like me and Mack and I, when we were in Antwerp, like after like 20 studio visits, and like every studio visit, wherever we go, the artists, they bring 5 catalogs on the table. And who did it? They did it themselves. Where the money is coming from, it will be given to them. So, and we're like, what's going on, man? You know, like, why don't we have some sort of like diamond trade, like Antwerp, you know? Because they have diamonds, you know, so they have that whole, money available to them, you know. So, and also it's important to look at how many people go to museum and gallery in New York. At least 50,000 a day they go to museum and galleries. LA, don't even think about it, you know. So it's nice to be in a city where the quality of work is reflected by how many people go see the shows and how many people travel in the city to go see art, you know. So, and we need to think about that.
And I always think that Portland is really difficult to define. You can talk about, we need to have more people who are going out and seeing things, and I can think of 50 people off the top of my head who are going out and seeing more things. It's sort of like, and I think Larry Rinder said this back in about 2003 in the Oregon, that he often thought of a real city as something that was impossible to define. And that he had suddenly felt that back then, Portland had become already like that. It was impossible for him. And this is after he had tried to pigeonhole Portland, and I kind of gave him a wedgie over it. And he came back and said, well, no, you can't, you're right. It's not just a bunch of people with PBR down in the basement. You also have, people who are Columbia grads who are working really hard, and you've got, I guess the danger is pigeonholing yourself too much and just sort of expecting surprises is probably the best possible way, because then you will be surprised. And I think if we can leverage our openness as a scene, I think that's what you were really talking about.
I mean, I think what you're really getting at too is the minutia of it all, right? It's like that fine line between regionalism and provincialism, right? Where we can be very open and supportive of the culture in which we're creating here in Portland. And, we've been really talking about the sort of visual art scene, but we could really expand it beyond that as well. And maybe actually we can learn some lessons from, say, the music industry here, or even the theater industry here. And then it's just that place where you're not quite navel-gazing, but you are still very aware of your belly button. It's just like you have to know where you're located in a space and in a place. And the reason we talk about New York and LA is not just money, but it's also where the sort of press is located. It is sort of like, I don't know an artist who wouldn't define success as a visit from a Whitney biennial curator, right? There's
or
just
being,
right.
Yeah,
even just a studio visit, I think most people would define that as success.
A series of successes is what you're
Well, that's
really
the part that needs to
May I
be
add one
raised.
more thing, please?
Yes.
I think that as a culture, we suffer from not the rise of stars, but the fade of stars. The next trend that moves in, we cancel the vote of everything that came before it. And I don't know where else to take that, but that's the thought.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
It's the shock of the new that people are just sort of addicted to, a little bit of change. I mean, if you're collecting art, you're collecting it because, well, there's a whole new class of people who see it as an investment class, but in the old sense of a true art collector, these are people who want to be surprised and who want to be engaged. And at least I think it's nice now that there is a kind of panoply of styles. You don't have to be an abstract expressionist, you don't have to be a minimalist, you don't have to be a post-minimalist who's making fun of the minimalists. It's sort of like, it's all okay right now. And it's maybe a healthier state of things. The question is do we really is that leading to patrons who are simply just not as engaged now?
Right, it's not like there's no style or trend necessarily in terms of like the movements that we used to know, but you know, artists right now are hot for like 40 months. That's pretty much the trend. Like if you look at somebody who you're seeing in the first 5 pages of Art Forum right now, look 40 months later and you won't see their names.
And one way to avoid that,
Unless you're Garrett Richter.
Right.
one way to avoid that is like
We're dead.
to have your own blog, you know, because as long as the artist is doing the work, you know, like you have people coming in if they know about it. And in a city like Portland, you know, the best way to do it is to have your own blog. And you know, I would encourage everybody to have a blog which would have the PDX or Portland or whatever there, because people are going online and searching to find out about Portland.
And if you're good, I'll link to you.
And it would be great if we all can just like have a very strong presence, whatever we do, and share that online.
But in a way, it's an illustration of what I was talking about, is the new thing comes in, and we just discard the old. Why not keep the publications that we've had that work so well and add blogs to it?
Which publications would you suggest?
Pardon me?
Which publications would you suggest?
I'm simply talking about periodicals with quality writing that also play a role. Because if you go into, of course this is part of evolution, and I don't want to embarrass myself by talking too long, but the mere point that someone who went through school 20 years ago, which is not very damn long, is lost because anything that they knew is gone. Instead of evolving, it's disappeared, and this has carried the other with it. And if we're talking about building a culture, it's not just a collection of passing trains.
And actually, that brings up one thing that I wanted to bring up, and I just didn't know how it. So, Portland, part of the reason we got into this problem is we had a habit of doing great things and not following through and following up on them. We created the ECDA, and then it went away. Oh God. That was interesting. But you don't want to. When PICA sort of canned their program back in 2004, you know, I think they found out that, hey, yeah, it led to a certain sort of stagnation. They were able to do the festival, but they also lost something by not keeping up a gallery program at the same time. And Kristen, who wanted to be here, and we could never find a night that would work with her and us, confided that to me. She was like, well, yeah, well, we learned our lesson, you know, and it's the same sort of thing. So you don't want to destroy or tear anything down that has been good. You want to wish them health and success and moving forward. I think, and we've done enough of cutting and run, and I don't think we want to do that anymore, because frankly, you know, this place was carved out of the woods not that long ago, even though there were more Native Americans living in this area than there are now white people.
I'm actually super interested in this notion that of follow through and like what we do next. And this is probably the arts administrator in me and somebody who takes minutes at meetings, but I would love if we could collectively come up with some action items that we might want to take away from this experience and like do something. I mean, I'm always of the mind of dissent daily in terms of bringing in some sort of socialist utopia. And so moving towards art socialist utopia, or at least some art utopia, maybe we can take away some action items here today.
Thank you.
Jim?
I also think, you know, we need to, I think we've always had a sense of low self-esteem beyond, in Portland. I think we need to get beyond these walls. You know, like we have to start in the mailroom and work our way up. And you can, apply for grants and fellowships all over the world and bring attention, to Portland by being out there. It's easier said than done, but, we can all be sleeper cells and go out. And that would bring attention to Portland. More than trying to work our way up to the best gallery in Portland.
Right, exactly. Right.
So who wants to take the minutes? I think we should. I think we should make a list because I've got at least 3 things. I'm certain the rest of you have plenty of good ideas. But that was something that I really wanted to make happen at the end of the night here. There's a wish list of things, action items that we would like to see. And then somebody will